Okay, so let's get started on a new Zen2 design. So we're on number 2, and this one's going to look a little bit different. Again, I'm using my 6B and my B pencils. I'm going to start with my B, and I'm going to give myself a couple of guidelines. Oh, I did it again, sorry. I'm going to start with my 6B, just kidding about the B thing, and I'm going to give myself a nice set of dark lines just inside my Zen2 square. And I'm not using a ruler. I'm just going slow enough that it's as close as I can get it to a square inside of a square. And I might go ahead and do that thing where I make the corners a little bit darker. I'm actually like coming in inside the corner so that there's a little more beefiness to that line. Now you might realize that the 6B pencil, because it is soft, it tends to draw really beautifully dark lines, but the more that we work on this page, the more likely graphite is to get on the inside of my hand. So I'm going to go to the last page in my sketchbook, and I'm going to sacrifice a piece of paper. I'm just going to tear slowly a piece of paper that is a little bit bigger than the edge of my hand so that I can use it to protect my hand from getting graphite on it, and more importantly, just keep my paper clean. So now I can use this paper, put it underneath my hand, rest my hand on it, and then there's a buffer between my hand and the graphite. So on this design, I promise, I am going to use my my B now, and I'm going to give myself a couple of guidelines, actually more like guide dots. So I want to break this up so that I know where the halfway point is between the upper two corners. So I'm going to give myself a little line to help me know where the upper two corners halfway mark is. It's just a little tiny line. It's not going all the way across. And then I'm doing the same thing at the bottom, same thing at the left hand side and the right hand side. Okay, and now I'm going to give myself a little dot that is in the middle. So I can do a couple of things. I can actually use the paper that I tore off if it has a straight edge, or I can use the straight edges of my mixed media tablet, and I'm going to put down the paper. If the paper isn't long enough, you might need to use the tablet, and give myself, I'm kind of eyeballing where it is, but I used my paper almost like a ruler, but I don't have a ruler this year. I don't need a ruler. I'm just going to use paper and help myself know where that middle is. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. This year is all about just enjoying the process and having fun. So now what we're going to do is, using our B pencil so that it's lighter, we're going to go ahead and pick the bottom left corner, and we're going to make a line that starts there, curves up and touches the middle mark, and then back around. And I'm making it light by not putting a lot of pressure on. And I'm going to do this for all 4 of my corners. And it's okay if it's not perfect. Again, that's what helps it look handcrafted. switch to my beautiful 6B pencil. And I'm going to go over those now that I can kind of see how they interact with each other. And I'm pressing down so that it gets that nice dark 6B. After I go over my first one, I'm going to go ahead and make additionals. You can kind of see that they act like petals. And my next one is going to come down. I'm going to loop up and around and up and around, and if I have a little bit extra, I'm going to come here. So I'm actually trying to make the next petal a little bit smaller, and then a little bit smaller, and these are just looping up and around, and then ending somewhere along my marks that I've made along each side, so that my shell or my petals take up kind of like this corner of my Zentangle box. I'm moving on to the next one. I'm going to go over my largest petal, and then I'm doing looping up and around, back into the corner where I started. That one got a little bit big, but no problem. When I start making my petals or my shells so that they're getting close to the petals or shells that I've already made, then I can just kind of sneak up and give them a little kiss. I'm going to see if I can try not to overlap them. And yours might turn out so that they're really symmetrical, or they might be a little bit less. Either way is okay. Now, if like you, it's a little awkward to get this angle. I forgot to put this underneath my hand. I want to do that. You might turn your sketchbook. That is perfectly okay. If you end up just getting 3 or 2 or 4 petals in, if yours looks a little bit different from mine, that's okay too. So now we have our foreground objects, which are these petals, and we have a background area, and I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to shade in that background so that it's dark. Now, since you're shading up against these petals, then you probably want to go nice and slow, especially around the petals, so that you keep that petal shape. And inevitably, even if you work really hard at it, it's possible that you'll kind of shade, like I'll show you. If I accidentally shade into this petal, then you can just reshape the petal, maybe make it a little bit shorter, and then fill in the area, the new background area. So a lot of art isn't doing something perfect. It's actually just figuring out ways of saving a little boo-boo or embracing the boo-boo, and sometimes little mistakes is what makes art interesting. So don't get too worried if you do something that's doesn't feel like it's exactly perfect or how you'd like it to be open to maybe there's a new opportunity there that you didn't have before. But if you find that you are shading into the petals a lot, you might want to slow down a little bit with your shading so that you have a little bit more control with your hand. There we go. Now I always like to have designs that have light, medium, and dark, and that have some texture. And so I'm going to take my B pencil now. My dark is the background, my light is the shells or the petals, but I'm going to go ahead and add some medium. So I'm going to use texture, and I'm going to start in the corner and pull using my B pencil out. And then I'm picking up my B pencil lightly, and what will happen is I'll make a strong line that ends in a very faint tip. I'm not going to go all the way to the end of the petal, but I am going to repeat this each time, making my lines just a little bit shorter. And it's going to give me really thin lines, and it's going to give me a sense of texture. So I'm starting with the line that's angled from the corner to the tip, but then I'm picking my pencil up before I get to the tip and repeating that so that there's this visual texture. And it was really easy because the visual texture was just using lines. I'll do that on all of my 4 corners. And again, if you find that you're having trouble making straight lines, you might be going a little too fast. So just slow down a little bit. There you go. That looks really good, but I'm going to add just one more step using my 6B pencil. I'm basically going to do the same thing, only I'm just going to go less than halfway out with the center line. So I'm starting at the corner, going about halfway down the petal, lifting up just with the center line. There you go. That's Zen2 design number 2. So successful artwork is based on use of the elements of art. It's one of the ways that artists talk about art, and it's one of the ways that artists think and make choices about design. So if we look at this Zentangle design and how it applies to the elements of art, we have to remember what the elements of art are, and there are posters at the front of the room. So if you take a minute and look up and look at the posters, then you'll see that there are 7 elements of art. I'm also going to post a picture now, and you can see that the elements of art include line, shape, color, value, form, texture, and space. And we've used some of these elements in creating this last Zentangle. So one element that we used is line. So I'd like for you to go ahead and change to your B pencil and just make a little notation over on the right hand side. Line. So we used lines, and we're going to point to 3 places that we used lines. So we used lines to create our outside border. These lines are straight and they are 90 degrees and they are geometric. We also used lines to create the inside border. This is a hand-drawn line, and we also used lines to create the elements that make up our petals, as well as the design inside of the petals. So that's one element of art, line, and they have different descriptions. So for instance, the line that creates the petals are curved, whereas the line that creates the borders are straight. So straight lines, curved lines, these are all different types of lines. We also used the lines to create shapes. So if we were to use an arrow and point to our repeated shape, this would be the petal, right? But there's also negative space in here. So these lines, as the petals come together, as they overlap, as they interact with each other, then they make shapes that are the petal shapes, but the shapes that are in between that you created without even knowing it, those are negative shapes. They are shapes that are the background in this case. So from our elements of art, we can write space, because positive and negative spaces, the positive space is the petals, so you can write petals, and the negative space are the shapes in between the petals. So let's go ahead and make a line that comes to the space in between the petals and make a little arrow if you can see it, just to remind us later. Okay, and then the positive would be the petals themselves. And then another element of art that we have applied here is texture. And we did this in the corners where we created this visual texture of these lines that are coming out. There's 2 types of texture. There's actual texture and visual texture. And actual texture, if I could take my finger and feel it, then it would be actual texture. So that usually has something to do with either a painting that has thickness to the paint, or maybe a sculpture that has some texture that you can touch. This isn't actual texture, this is visual texture. And it just means that if you look at it, it looks like it would have some texture, but it's all in how the artist created it. So great job, you've used line, shape, space, and texture, elements of art in this Zentangle. Awesome job.